Hello, it is 9/11, September 11th, 2024. We're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 22 tonight. That'll be in about 5 minutes. We're going to start our Bible study. I've got, to monologue a little bit before we do that. I like to give people a little bit of time to get logged into their Facebook accounts and show up on the live stream. I didn't realize that I was looking a little scruffy. I guess I should probably just assume that. You would think that after doing this, as long as I've been doing it, I would think to go to the mirror and look at myself before I started this. Oh well, right? That's not why you're here. And that's certainly not why I am here. I was thinking about 9/11, as you do on today. And I like to have the conversation with people on 9/11, about what they were doing when they heard about the terrorist attacks and how they found out, what they thought of it at the time, things like that. I was actually living in Hungary on 9/11 and had a complete stranger knock on my door, and he was sent by a friend of mine who was worried about my family. He didn't know where my family lived, of course, so he just assumed if there's a problem in New York, it probably affects Americans all across the country, and he wanted to just, make sure that I knew and check on me and stuff like that. And then, actually, now that I think about it, I was leading a Bible study, and I was supposed to teach that night. I kind of had forgotten that detail, and of course we canceled the Bible study, and we sat around the television for a long while until my roommate Emer and I got hungry, and he said, "Hey, let's go down to the shawarma place because there's Muslims who own that place, and let's go ask them about this." So we went down to the shawarma place. There were a couple guys from Iran who owned and operated that place, and they still do. Actually, we went to their new restaurant. It was called Oasis back then. No, it was called Alibaba's back then, and it's called Oasis now. And it's still the same guys running it. My kids and I had some shawarma from them when we went there in the spring. But Imre was just like, "Hey, what do you guys think about this? Is this something that you think everybody should do?" And of course they said, no, this is not what Islam is really all about and all the rest. But that's my story. I know everybody's got their own, and I think it's good to take a bit and just reflect on how the world has changed in 20 years. Crazy to think about. I guess it's been 23 years, if I do the math correctly. That's a long time, and the world is a drastically different place. Anyway, I don't have any concluding thoughts for you on that. Everybody's got to draw their own conclusions, I guess. Because right now it's time for us to pray, and we're going to read the Bible, which is what we're actually here for. Jesus, I thank you for this opportunity for us to stop and put down whatever it is that we have been worrying about, everything that we might have on our plate at this moment, Lord, and help us to focus on you, on what your word has to say to us, Lord. I pray that you would let the things of the world grow dim around us so that we can see your face more clearly. So Lord, teach us from your word. Help us to see how we can take your word and apply it to our daily lives as we live them now. In Jesus' name, amen. So last week we left off at a very low point in David's life. I wouldn't say that it's his lowest point, but it's a low point for David. He was on the run from Saul, and he made a, somewhat clever decision to cross the border outside of the border of Israel so that he would have, a little more space between him and Saul's army. They would be reluctant to cross the border into the Philistine territory in order to attack David, because it would make possibly a war break out. And so David ran into the land of the Philistines, and he kind of undid his cleverness by running right into the city of Gath. David was famous in Gath because he had killed their hero, Goliath, and he walked into Gath carrying the sword of Goliath, which I'm positive was quite distinctive, being as large as it was. And I'm sure, Goliath was like special forces in the Philistines' army, and so he probably had, a really high-end sword, I'm guessing. It doesn't say that, but that's the conclusion that I come to. Anyway, after Goliath, David went on to kill a great many more Philistines as a general. So he was not a popular man in Gath. The king Ashish looked at him and said, "Hey, why do we have this guy in our court?" Well, his advisor said that to him, "Hey, why do you have David here? You know who he is, right? We've heard the songs that they sing about him, and how many of us that guy right there has killed." So David pretended to be crazy. He drooled on himself. He scribbled nonsense on the walls and on the gate. And my kids saw me doing that, and they think I'm waving at them. The house windows are right there behind you. Anyway, Ashes looked at him now and thought, "Hey, I have plenty of crazy people already. We don't need to import anymore. Let's get this David guy out of here." So David escaped from Gath, but he did not escape with his dignity. So here we are. We're in 1 Samuel 22, where we pick up tonight, this evening, today, late afternoon. Chapter 22, verse 1. David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam, and when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to him. And everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was bitter in soul, gathered to him, and he became commander over them. And there were with him about 400 men. So David fled from the land of the Philistines and crossed back over into Israeli territory. He's kind of just over the border. And he finds a cave to hide in Adullam. This isn't really part of the story, but I think it's interesting, and it's important for us to sort of pay attention to this every once in a while as we're reading the story of David. That, when David crossed the border into Israel from Philistia, the land of the Philistines, it wasn't as an invasion. It wasn't an aggressive move on David's part. And of course that's obvious, right? It should be obvious, but everything that David did throughout the time that he was running from King Saul was completely in self-defense. He was only trying to survive. He was not at all trying to make any kind of aggressive move towards Saul. Even though he ends up with many opportunities, David never attempts to seize the kingdom from Saul. He respects the office of the king, even if the man, Saul, was not respectable. So Saul treated David as an enemy. He treated him as someone who was trying to usurp the throne from him, someone who was actively trying to kill him. But all David ever did was just try to save his own life. And now, where we are in chapter 22, he's not just saving his own life, but now he has his family that he is going to try to preserve. And he is given charge now of 400 men who just show up to volunteer. When he arrives at this cave, his family heard of it in one way or another. And it only occurred to me this time around studying First Samuel that they were probably already on the run from Saul. It was definitely not above Saul to attack David's family or to hold them as some kind of collateral against David to make him come out of where he was wherever he was hiding. So I think it's likely that they had sort of already gone off the grid, that Jesse had taken his sons and whoever else was alive in David's household. We only ever really hear about his brothers, but they had probably already gone into hiding. And it might be, this is just something that I'm sort of speculating on. It might be that they had sort of, off the grid sort of hobo camp that a lot of these other men came from, and they went and joined this group of malcontents, people in debt, people who were hiding from one reason or another, and Jesse's family kind of just joined this group. So then when they heard about David being back in Israel, as Jesse and his sons went to go to David, perhaps the group that came with them or showed up after them heard because they were all together already. It's not biblical, right? It's not written in here. That's not how it says specifically that it happened, but that's kind of what I'm speculating on. So one way or the other, David's family heard that he was back in Israel. Perhaps David sent word to them in some way or another, or perhaps word got around. And along with David's family came all of these people, and it says that David became a commander over them. So David has a 400-man army now, right? But it's not some elite military group. It's not like the crack team of specialists that I've always sort of considered to be the people that hung out with David when he was a fugitive. Is his core group, his most loyal men from his company, or his chosen special bodyguards who would go with him everywhere. It wasn't like the handpicked group. It was the people who were in trouble, the people who were in debt, the people who were in one way or another just discontented. That's the word I'm looking for, with society, with Israel, with the rule of Saul, or just with their own lives in one way or another. That's who came out to David. People that society didn't want. People that society was okay living without. Those people can be on the run somewhere. They can be out on the outskirts of the city, as long as they don't bother me. Not in my backyard, right? And so they were the people who came to David. And I think, if this was a modern day story, I would picture David hiding in the woods somewhere, and all of a sudden, a group of homeless people come to join him, a group of drug addicts, or a group of people who were just constantly in and out of jail are showing up to ask David, hey, we don't know what to do. Can you just lead us? Just take us somewhere. We know that you're on the run, and we want to be on the run with you. And that whole thing kind of just reminds me of the things that Jeff was talking about on Sunday morning when we were in James. This is James chapter 1, verse 9 that we studied on Sunday, where it says, let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation, and let the rich in his humiliation, because like a flower of the grass he will pass away. And the whole time that we were, I was in the back on Sunday morning. I didn't have any responsibilities. I didn't teach anything. on Sunday. So I just got to sit and listen. And I kept thinking about how our faith, our collective church, the people who belong to Jesus, Jesus is primarily embraced by people who are in distress, people who are in debt, people who are bitter in soul. And I think that's because it takes humility to accept that you need help. It takes humility to call out to someone else to save you because you recognize that you can't do it yourself. And those people who are sort of unused to needing help, people who are fine on their own, they have a harder time calling out to God to help them because they think, I don't need help from people. Why would I need help from God? And so in the church, I feel like we have a pack of strays, just like King David had here. Just a pack of strays show up and make up David's army. And that's what we have when we get together on Sunday morning church, is people who recognize, hey, I need help. People who recognize I'm not doing well on my own. I can't make it without help. And so they call out to a savior. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 26 through 29. For consider your calling, brothers. Not many of you were wise according to worldly standards. Not many were powerful. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, even things that are not, to bring to nothing the things that are, so that no human being might boast in the presence of God. And of course, just like Jeff said on Sunday, that doesn't mean that you have to be poor in order to follow Jesus, or it's impossible to follow Jesus if you are rich, or if you are, in these words, wise according to worldly standards. You can be powerful according to worldly standards and follow Jesus. But he says, not many of you can be described that way. And so, I'm happy to be a part of that group of outcasts. I'm happy to be a part of that group of, social rejects. We recognize we need Jesus, and we're going to follow him. We're going to follow him. And so it's not surprising that we have this group of outcasts from society joining up in one place, but it's sort of odd that we see this group that comes to David, and they're not the elite military force. They're not, the people that you would typically think of, like, I'm going to go seek out these people to join my group, right? They're not the first choice of your dodgeball team. But it's interesting what happens to this group of people, even though they weren't the special forces of the day. They became the special forces of the day because of the leadership of David. They became the most successful military unit in Israel, even before they were part of the Israeli army. And, we're going to see David take this group of outcasts and lead them into battle over and over again in the coming chapters. And they will take on some of the enemies of Israel that the Israeli army was unable to defeat, and David does without a problem with these outcasts, with these people who probably had no military experience before they joined up with David. In the book of 1 Chronicles, we get a list of the names and the deeds of a group that's called David's Mighty Men. They were like the elite of the elite in David's army once he was the king. One guy, it says, killed 300 men in one battle with just his spear. Another guy held a field by himself against an entire army. And there's another guy who was said that he climbed down into a pit and killed a lion with his hands. So these were tough guys, right? And in 1 Chronicles chapter 11, it tells us that some of those guys who were in David's mighty men joined up with David right here in 1 Samuel chapter 22. This is 1 Chronicles 11:15. It says, 3 of the 30 chief men went down to the rock to David at the cave at Adullam when the army of the Philistines was encamped in the valley of Rephaim. So the weak and the outcast are flourishing under David. And it takes time, right? It doesn't happen immediately. But I love to see that sort of thing happen over and over again throughout, the sort of long game of being in ministry. If you see people who are rough when they come in, right? They look like they are there. They don't have anything to offer. They just need everybody to take care of them, right? And then after some time, you see that God is doing something in their lives, and all of a sudden, they're the ones who are taking care of other people. And we've had so many people who've come to Simple Truth Church as like rejects from other churches, people who were kicked out of other churches, people who were, talented, but not allowed to serve in any way, shape, or form because they didn't fit the mold of what, that church wanted to be in the front of everybody else. And so they come to Simple Truth Church, and all of a sudden they're serving, they're doing children's ministry, they're leading worship, things like that. Pack of strays. I love to see it happen. Because that's what Jesus does with us. David is this incredible foreshadowing of Jesus. And we see him take this group of outcasts, homeless, drug addict, whatever guys, show up to, hey, just show us around. Just take care of us, please. We're on the run from Saul also. Everybody is against us, just like they're against you. So just be our leader. And he turns them into this elite group of fighting men just because of who he is. And that's what Jesus does with us, right? We're nothing to write home about. There's not many powerful. There's not many wise. There's not many who, whatever else in there from Corinthians. I can't remember it all, but we're not that, right? We're nothing that anyone would be excited about. But with Jesus at the helm, with Jesus leading us and teaching us and making us to be more like him, he can do great things from us. Verse 3. We spent a lot of time on 2 verses there. And David went from there to Mizpah of Moab. And he said to the king of Moab, please let my father and my mother stay with you till I know what God will do with me. And he left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with him all the time that David was in the stronghold. Then the prophet Gad said to David, do not remain in the stronghold, depart and go into the land of Judah. So David departed and went into the forest of Hereth. So David took this group of men and their families and his family, and they went into Moab. So he's, again, crossing outside of the border of Israel now. He is, again, trying to put some distance, put a border between him and Saul. Moab is actually across the Dead Sea from Israel, so he feels like there's some security there. And really what he's doing there is he wants to leave his family there. He wants his parents to have asylum here in Moab. It doesn't say how long he was there. It doesn't say, how he decided that this place in Moab would be a good place for his parents. Although we know that David's, his grandmother, Ruth, was from Moab. And so he's got some kind of family connections there. There's reason to believe that his parents would possibly be safe there. It wasn't sort of unusual for a political asylum seeker to leave outside of Israel or outside of any of the other countries in that time and go to seek asylum in a separate country. Perhaps that's why David was in Gath. But he tries here in Moab, and they let them stay there until finally the prophet Gad says to David, hey, it's time for you to go back into Israel. And so he does, into a wilderness area known as the forest of Hereth. So that's sort of our King David episode of this chapter. Now we're going to switch perspectives, and we're going to read about what Saul was doing during this time. Verse 6. Now Saul heard that David was discovered and the men who were with him. Saul was sitting at Gibeah under the tamarisk tree on the height with his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing about him. And Saul said to his servants who stood about him, "Hear now, people of Benjamin, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards? Will he make you all commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds, that all of you have conspired against me? No one discloses to me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse. None of you is sorry for me or discloses to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait, as it is this day." Then answered Doeg the Edomite, who stood by the servants of Saul, I saw the son of Jesse come to Nob to Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, and he inquired of the Lord for him, and gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. So he's out in this orchard area. He's actively on the hunt for David, and he gets some kind of news about, hey, David is back in Israel now. And so he calls all of his servants together. I'm thinking of his chief of staff and his cabinet are there around him. And he turns to them and say, "Hey, how come nobody here has been warning me? How come nobody told me that David was back in town or back in the country? How come none of you helped me out when David and Jonathan made this covenant together? How come nobody warned me that Jonathan was against me?" All the rest of the stuff. And he basically is asking, "Hey, did David try to bribe you? Is he bribing you to conspire against me?" And this is a sort of backwards way of offering them bribes. Like he's basically telling them, "Listen, I want David, and I'm going to reward whoever it is who brings David to me. So if you've got news of David, let me know, and this is how I'm going to set you up with orchards and vineyards, and I'm going to make you a commander." And he's basically going to take property from other people and give it to the people who are his friends, who are his allies in this time. And it's very interesting to see how Saul talks about his son Jonathan in this little bit here. He is going so far as to say that Jonathan is lying in wait against Saul. And I say it's interesting because, of course, Jonathan is not doing that. We'd already talked about how David is not trying to take the throne from Saul. He's just trying to survive. And yet everything that Saul accuses David and Jonathan of is what he is actually trying to do, right? David didn't offer anybody bribes. Saul is actively offering people bribes. David isn't lying in wait for Saul's life. Saul is lying in wait for David's life. He's tried to spear him. He sent assassins after him to his home. He tried to kill David as he sought refuge with Samuel, and over again. And this is nothing that Jonathan and David haven't done anything to Saul, but Saul is constantly going after them. And this, isn't that how we see things? So often people who level all of these accusations of sin against their opponent or their rival, and it usually turns out to be that the one who's making all the accusations is the person who's actually the guilty party. So while they're standing there, there's this guy, Doeg, the Edomite. And we talked about him, I want to say it was just last chapter. It might have been further back than that. My memory is a little bit hazy. The last couple of weeks have just really been a blur. But he remembers how he saw that David passed through the city of Nob, and how the priest who was there, Ahimelech, helped David out. Doeg has no reason to betray David. David hasn't done anything wrong to Doeg, but he is looking for that bribe that Saul is offering. Verse 11. Then the king sent to summon Ahimelech and the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, the priests who were at Nob, and all of them came to the king. And Saul said, "Hear now, son of Ahitub, And he answered, Here I am, my lord. And Saul said to him, Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, in that you have given him bread and a sword, and have inquired of God for him, so that he has risen against me to lie in wait as at this day? Then Ahimelech answered the king, And who among all your servants is so faithful as David? Who is the king's son-in-law and captain over your bodyguard and honored in your house? Is today the first time that I have inquired of God for him? No, let not the king impute anything to his servant or to all the house of my father, for your servant has known nothing of all this, much or little. And the king said, You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house. And the king said to the guard who stood around him, Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand is also with David. And they knew that he fled and did not disclose it to me. But the servants of the king would not put out their hand to strike the priests of the Lord. Then the king said to Doeg, You turn and strike the priests. And Doeg the Edomite turned and struck down the priests, and he killed on that day 85 persons who wore the linen ephod. At Nob, the city of the priests, he put to the sword both man and woman, child and infant, ox, donkey, and sheep, he put to the sword. So here's where it goes from bad to worse. Ahimelech answers the king completely reasonably. He basically points out, why would I distrust anything that David has done? He has been your right-hand man. He is your personal bodyguard. He is your son-in-law. Why would I think anything about David coming to me and asking him to inquire of the Lord and asking me for supplies? I've done that many times before. But even though this is a completely logical argument that Ahimelech is making, this sort of hatred, jealousy, logic doesn't enter into that equation. And so Saul just wants revenge. The guards will not lay a hand on the priest, even though they're ordered to. They're no, this is not okay. Saul is off the rails, and so Saul turns to Doeg, who is obviously extremely selfishly motivated, and he'll do it. He has no problem at all killing all of these priests, and then he gets his wish of leading a group. He's made a commander of an army that goes and burns the city of Nob to the ground over some imagined wrong from Saul. They hadn't done anything. All they had done is given help to a man who asked for help, who had been part of Saul's loyal army since forever. And, David is still a loyal subject of Saul. He still considers Saul to be his king, and he refuses to take any sort of aggressive action towards him. But Doeg, being the selfish man that he is, he'll do whatever it takes to gain for himself. Verse 20. But one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. And David said to Abiathar, I knew on that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would surely tell Saul, I have occasioned the death of all the persons of your father's house. Stay with me, do not be afraid, for he who seeks my life seeks your life. With me you shall be in safekeeping. So David gets one more. He's had 400 outcasts, and now he has one more man who's on the run, another fugitive. This guy ends up being David's priest because he's part of the priesthood, and he stays around with David. But the heart of David, I feel like, is just broken by this news, because he blames himself. He says, "Hey, this is on me. If I had done something about Doeg, if I had never gone to see your father, if and he blames himself. He says, this is on my hands." But you know what? David did not choose to become an enemy of Saul. He didn't choose to disregard the protection that God has on his priesthood. He didn't do anything wrong here. He certainly didn't put out his hand to kill all of these priests. And I feel like, this is sort of a common reaction to somebody around us dying. Like, what could I have done to change that? How is this my fault? But it's all on Saul. Saul's the one who made these decisions, and he's not doing this haphazardly. He's doing this on purpose as psychological warfare, because now everybody knows that Saul will not stop at anything to get to David. He is not even going to hesitate to kill priests who help David. And so now, who's going to be willing to help David from now on? There's going to be a lot more hesitation on the part of anyone who sees David to offer him any kind of aid. So that's why Saul does this, and it's just despicable, that between Doeg being selfish and Saul just motivated by jealousy and hatred, we see the damage that can come about from evil men, and we have to be on guard. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you when we read your Old Testament, when we read about how things were thousands and thousands of years ago, we see that the world hasn't really changed all that much. People who are selfish will do anything, whatever it takes to be in power, to be more wealthy. They'll lie, they'll cheat, they'll steal, they'll kill. And so, Lord, I pray that you would help us to be those who stand against evil men. And I know that sometimes it looks like there's no hope, that the world is just going completely to hell, and we're helpless against it, Lord. But I see, just like David, you reward faithfulness. And even if we don't, lead the troops in the battle, if we don't go and lead an army against evil, Lord, just our obedience to you is all that it takes to stand against evil men in an evil day. Lord, we just want to be those who were obedient to you. Lord, we trust in you and rely upon you and not upon our own flesh. So, Lord, help us to be like David. Help us to trust in you. And I pray that you would use us, just like you used David, to set the world right. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, folks, thank you guys for joining me. Lovely day outside. I think it's probably 20 degrees cooler today than it was last week. There's meat bees after me at this point now, so I'm going to go. God bless you guys. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.